All right, you guys, I've got with me today Joey from the channel Jolah. It's pretty great. He's got some great political commentary over there, and we're gonna just be chatting about the election results. Because I mean, Joey, I was looking at this, and there could not have been a better day to have this conversation with you because I was looking at these results, and I mean, progressives are up and away. We're doing great. You look at New York, I mean, Jamaal Bowman crushing it. Mondaire Jones crushing it. AOC crushing it. Charles Booker, Amy McGrath. The numbers look a little scary, but if you look at where they're coming in from, there's hope. There's really, there's a lot of hope in there. How you feeling? How you feeling?
I think it's absolutely great. It's showing the decay at the grassroots level even more so of, for corporate Democrats. I mean, they pulled out Hillary to try to defeat Bowman. They couldn't do that. And right now, even with all these polls being closed in predominantly black areas, we're having a good race against McGrath. And we're going to see how that turns out. Hopefully, like you said, the areas that things are coming in, it looks good. But that'll be a big one. If we can
It'll
get
be a
that
big
right
one.
there,
Yeah.
progressive from across the country will be calling into that state.
No kidding. And I imagine that anyone who's going up against Mitch McConnell is going to get so much name recognition and so much boost. Like even among like corporate Democrats, they have this seething hatred of Mitch McConnell that I imagine that they would be willing to go with a true progressive like Charles Booker just because they hate Mitch McConnell so much, which I think is really, really good because it gives a really good opportunity to get that progressive voice out there to people who might not typically listen to it or be open to hearing those kinds of ideas.
We definitely need to make sure that throughout this process, people are aware of the playing field. So if they say Booker won and this is why we lost to McConnell, we need to be upfront with the numbers. That will not be why. This is a very difficult race for people on the left to win in general. And I think
Yeah.
if we do run progressives in all these districts, and in New York we're good, the Democrats are going to win, progressive Democrats. But when it comes to this, we need to make sure people know that we are fighting for this position. It's not going to be easy no matter who we run, but this is the person who's given us the best chance.
Yeah, I mean, did you see the Data for Progress poll? I mean, compared to Amy McGrath, some polls are suggesting that Charles Booker is the better candidate to go up against Mitch McConnell than
Yep.
is Amy McGrath, the pro-Trump Democrat, which just confuses me. I mean, what are you talking about? You're sitting here saying, okay, Mitch McConnell needs to go because Mitch McConnell is anti-Trump. He's blocking Trump, so we need to get someone in there who's going to be more pro-Trump. What? What are you talking about, dude? What are you
hmm
talking about? That's Amy McGrath for you.
Yeah, it's another argument like, okay, she will not be nearly as bad as McConnell because McConnell is a human slime ball. I mean, he is disgusting. He's the lowest form of politician you can
Okay.
reach. So, of course, nothing could be as bad as him. But yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to try to bring in a Democrat who is pro Trump because the ideology thinks that what people who like Trump are not going to vote for McConnell
Well,
after all this.
the thing though that does kind of upset me is most likely McGrath would lose, and she's missing out on like if she runs this pro-Trump Democrat, she's missing out on an opportunity to actually shift the dialogue. Right? Like people make up their minds by looking at the resources, looking at the arguments presented to them in the public square, right? So if you're presenting a bunch of pro-Trump arguments because, oh, then I'm going to win, well, what you've just done is forfeited all the ground, man. And that's the stuff that really pisses me off. That's the stuff where it's like, well, you've got to have courage. You have to have that willingness, that ability to say, you know what? Yeah, I might lose this one, but damn it, I'm going to win the next one. And that's the kind of grit that I think is really important for any politician to have. So I also want to talk about Mondaire Jones, though, because that one's pretty exciting too. I mean, first openly gay first openly gay black congressman winning in New York's 17th congressional district. I mean, it was a blowout, just like Jamaal Bowman. I mean, it was a blowout.
Yeah, and I think it's really telling. You see all the people from the establishment playing identity politics all the time, and the races that are
Mm,
being shifted right now that the establishment doesn't like. It's going from people who are serving their 1,000 terms, these old white men, it might be an old white woman, and it's just old white people that have been in the party. And they're pushing back against these people of color, people in the LGBT community, and it's really showing their true colors even more so. I mean, we've seen so many examples on top of examples of the establishment crumbling and their true colors showing, but I think even mainstream people are starting to get it. In my conversations with
mm-hmm.
typical Biden Democrats, they are seeing how the party is like beholden to corporate interest. I mean, we've seen that for a while, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is exciting to see kind of that facade kind of beginning to crackle, that image that they try to put up. And I will say, your point there where people are starting to wake up, I think they're also waking up to cynical uses of identity politics. Now, look, identity politics is very important. I do think that it's very important, but there is a time there are ways in which it is cynically used and weaponized. And when we talk about Mondaire Jones, there isn't enough general excitement from establishment figures talking about, look, we've just gotten our first openly gay black congressman. I mean, if that was a corporate centrist, I feel like, people would be celebrating, right? Like Democrats, mainstream Democrats would be talking about how, this is a historic win. And I mean, it is. That's the thing. It absolutely is.
Yeah, and it's more about ideology. It should be more about ideology than just what color or what who someone loves. But we don't want to give any more power to Candace Owens to come up and say, because I'm black, I speak for all black people. We need to recognize that within these groups, they're not monolithic. There's a lot of diversity within, whether you're LGBTQ, whether you are a black man. I hated the media coverage this year during the primary for a multitude of reasons, but one
Mm.
of those is pretending that South Carolina and their black representation represents every black person in the country, when in reality, they would probably be Republican down there if it wasn't, if the Republicans weren't so despicable on race. But you cannot use that mask to say, all black people in Carolina are like the people in
Yeah.
Seattle, like the people in New York,
Hmm.
and like the people in LA. It's simply not true, and there's not enough diversity spoken about in there. So this is a good opportunity for progressives to prove that we're the ones who actually care about this stuff.
Yeah, and part of the problem though actually does boil down to the Democratic strategy or Democratic Party's like over reliance, overuse of certain kinds of Democratic strategists where, when you plug in data, right, the only way you can plug in data is doing it according to demographic groups, right? And so if the distinctions that you're using are black or, certain income categories, certain income groups, then you end up creating these models, which you think are predicting the world, but in some sense, they often then times turn around and influence the world, and that's something uh, you know that we need to be, I guess, kind of wary of. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, they find a way to manipulate statistics, and all statistics can be manipulated as corporations and media want them to be manipulated. Whether it's the graphics they use, I'm sure you've seen during the primaries, Andrew Yang and Bernie Sanders and the graphics, how they would highlight a candidate that was losing to one of them, or make a graphic look like they were doing bad when they were doing
Right.
good. These stats can be manipulated. We don't know where they come from, and they're not really using scholarly sources, and if they are, they're misrepresenting where the actual data is collected and what the variables are in that data. There could be an outstanding variable, a third variable that's affecting the data that they're just simply not bringing up. Like it could be class could be influencing race more than race is influencing the vote, and they aren't going to bring that up in media. And that's for people like us to do and try to, in our conversations with people as well, try to open up their minds to that.
Well, right. I mean, it's tricky to do. It's tricky to do. Like I mean, that kind of stuff takes a lot of research, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of information, and when you're running on a 24-hour news cycle, you get a poll. Yeah, the network that talks about it first gets the most. Gets the best award. So definitely doesn't create any incentives for journalists to do the kinds of things that we might want. Now, the other interesting thing when it comes to this is some of the criticisms when it comes to police, right? Because some people are saying that possibly the I should say upswing of progressives is related to this major surge in Black Lives Matter. The major surge across the country. You look at Charles Booker, you look at Mondaire Jones there. Do you think there's any? I mean, obviously, like it is true, right? Like there's been a massive surge across the country. But do you think that progressives were sort of insurgent or ascendant before that, or do you think in that caused the protests? Or I mean, how do you sort of think about this?
I think the protests did help these candidates do better, but it's not just because they're black and Black Lives Matter was the topic. It's because our entire system is being revealed. When people could be comfortable, when people feel the need to return to whatever normal we were at, they're going to go corporate Democrat. But when they saw how not only coronavirus, but now this police brutality thing blew up, it's ruining their comfortability. They can't be comfortable anymore with the old normal because they know that led to this. And we know the past 20 years of politics led to Donald Trump, and they always blame Trump on other factors. But again, hopefully, people are starting to see the root causes of what's actually happening. And the mainstream media dumbing it down to identity politics in this situation, in my opinion, is pretty despicable, saying the black guys won just because they were black,
Yeah, I mean
essentially.
that specific part, absolutely, I definitely agree with that. But there is, I mean, I do think that there is at least some merit to saying that, you know, you have these massive protests, and for instance, especially in the case of Charles Booker, I mean, he
Mm,
really managed to capture the protests in a certain sense. You saw him out protesting with the people. There was
yeah.
multiple viral clips of him, and that's really, you know, where his sort of energy came from in that sense. He showed that he was a true leader and a leader in a movement. Whereas, you know, you look at Amy McGrath, saying, "Oh no, I wasn't really at the protest. Why? Well, because my kids, and also, you know, coronavirus. I don't know. Is that really what we're supposed to be doing? You know." So
Mm.
we ended up, you know, she's basically making excuses for not going, for not fighting for justice, and it really, I think, showed a kind of hollowness, as you've been sort of accurately pointing out, to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I think you're totally correct on that point. I'm just saying, like, the movement had to be provided, obviously, by something.
Hmm.
If it didn't happen, these candidates probably wouldn't have won. I think the Angle race would have gone the same way. I because that was a pretty big lead. But I mean, even him coming up at that one Black Lives Matter event and the hot mic where he was like, I don't really care about speaking right now. I just want to do it because I'm up for re-election.
Right. He said,
That was the defining moment.
if I didn't have a primary, I wouldn't care. I mean, that's yeah. I mean, that definitely put the race in
Mm.
play.
Yeah, but objectively, they are the better candidates when you're talking democracy, and that's not just because I agree with them ideologically. It's
Hmm.
because the people who were running were backed by all the corporations in the world, and we know that how corruption works in our system. And most people are apolitical, and apolitical people aren't going to look up who is this person funded by. They're going to see their ads, and they're going to be emotionally evoked by that. They're going to be scared. They're going to be uh, fear-mongered by the media saying this Democrat can't be or this progressive can't beat this Republican, and they'll act on that emotion. But you're totally correct. They saw people like Booker out there being leaders in a movement, and that's what caught their emotion in this scenario. And that's what really matters because our political system right now is definitely 100% the politics of perception. What people believe to be real will be real. People aren't, I mean, they don't have the time during this financial
Hmm.
collapse, this pandemic, to look at all these facts that we have the time to do because we're really, really into this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the things though that I do think is interesting is, you know, 3 months ago, progressives seemed down and out. 3 months ago was Super Tuesday, and everything. I mean, it seemed like the world was ending. I mean, coronavirus was coming on. The world. I mean, it was just it was a disaster.
Yeah.
It felt
Right
like,
when Bernie dropped out,
yeah,
too.
yeah, I remember that, and I just remember feeling like, damn, like progressives have lost ground. Progressives lost ground. That's how I felt. That was genuinely how I felt at the time. But clearly, that sort of emotional knee jerk reaction, which I had to Bernie Sanders suddenly getting defeated in Super Tuesday, was clearly wrong, right? Like, you know, you look at this stuff, and progressives are picking up seats all over New York. I mean, New York 16, New York 17, right? You know, we're talking about Kentucky. Kentucky is in play for progressives, possibly. I mean, this is really exciting, and it gives me um, maybe a little bit more hope. It makes me think that something had to have happened in the intervening time, like some kind. You know, there was some energy that was pent up that just boom, that exploded,
Mhm.
and resulted in at least partially some of these results.
Yeah, the typical people who work within the framework of our current politics, they simply don't understand the reality of the situation because they operate in this reality TV show mindset. So these big crises we're facing basically forced people to look at the reality. And progressives, for a while now, have been pointing out flaws in the system that have been there and have been apparent, but people weren't feeling that directly yet. But now they
Hmm.
see this crisis happening, they see all the jobs leaving, they're losing healthcare, they see countries overseas with single payer doing much better handling this crisis. They're seeing the money influence and corruption in government. They're seeing Jeff Bezos have a $40 billion increase in wealth in the past 3 months. And everything Bernie Sanders ran on is being vindicated here and being totally justified. And people are like, wait a second, he made a lot of sense. And I probably, still would have voted for him if I wasn't so worried about Trump because they thought he was unrealistic and thought that Bernie's ideas wouldn't play for a general election. But we're seeing now in these down ballot races. Hopefully, it'll prove them wrong, saying, okay, progressives can win in Kentucky, and that'll be a big deal.
Yeah, and one of the things that was so I found really exciting was the sudden swing on polling when it came to, for instance, the phrase Black Lives Matter. I mean, I don't know if you saw the polling data, but it looked like essentially it was making no movement, and then out of nowhere suddenly like, well, I don't remember the exact number. Was it like 70% or something, like something crazy, like 60%? Like a very high number of the country is like, yeah, I'm in favor of that term. Now, you might criticize that and be like, well, a term is just a term. It means whatever it means to an individual person. But to see such a sudden swing gives me a lot of optimism. A- Am I wrong to have that optimism?
No, it's serving as a really good learning point for a lot of people. This case with George Floyd is very different when you talk about other shootings. There was no justification. That's why it shook the world. There was no one to say, oh, he shouldn't have ran. Oh, he shouldn't have done whatever. The cop made a mistake. He shot too quick because it took, 8 minutes and I forget the exact number of seconds, but that's a long, long time. And when
Right.
people saw that video, and it's been happening off camera, and with Breonna Taylor, we're seeing there's no justice there. But like I said, it's politics of perception. What people see is going to be what they believe and what they act on. And this is a really good moment for that. And I don't want to make it seem callous to say that George Floyd served such a big role in this because he isn't able to partake in the movement. But it is crazy the point he is serving in our history. Like his daughter said, he is changing the world. And I do think Black Lives Matter being a more popular stance does matter because that means more people are catching on to what it actually means. They're not saying
Right.
all lives matter. They're seeing that people who said all lives matter weren't saying all lives matter when black men were being killed. They said all lives matter as a protest to the protest, and I think that's great.
Yeah, it is. It is exciting to see. Now, one of the things though that I do sometimes worry about is, you have a lot of people who are, agreeing like, oh, Black Lives Matter, and then as you point out there, they see what they might want to see in a certain sense, and I do sometimes worry that there's a lot of people out there who still look at it, don't see it as a systemic issue. They see it as an issue of, okay, this cop was bad. Clearly,
Yep.
people will look at that and be like, Derek Chauvin was in the wrong, and then they'll see another cop and be like, okay, well, that cop was right, and then it becomes a question of good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, not thinking
Yep.
for a moment. And this isn't a criticism of individual people who might think this way, but like taking a moment to think, well, hold on, why did this interaction even need to happen, or taking a little bit of a step back. And my hope is, when it comes to this Black Lives Matter thing, is it won't just be an instance of a response, right? They hear, okay, the pollster calls and asks, do Black Lives Matter? And the thing that they're thinking about is George Floyd. And so then they say, yeah, Black Lives Matter because I agree that the killing of George Floyd was unjust.
Yep.
Hopefully what can happen is maybe even a kind of tribal effect. I don't really know the political science junkiness of it, but maybe a kind of I agree with Black Lives Matter. I'm in on these protests, or I generally agree with the mood, and then they might look up a couple of other things and then feel like their views have to come in line with some of the other stuff that people are talking about. That's my hope, man. I don't know if that's justified, but that's my hope.
It is hard to get people to think systemically, especially if they themselves can't see how the systems around them are affecting them. If they can't see how they were put into a poor neighborhood and how Amazon and Walmart killed their jobs, they're not going to understand the systemic police violence or anything. But at least they're taking a step forward because it is a process. You're not going to go from nothing. You're not going to go
Hmm.
from all lives matter to defund the police in one swift swing. And I think we need to watch out for corporations right now, all saying Black Lives Matter and doing
Yeah.
little to actually change anything, because then we get into what MLK warned about with the white moderate. We're getting complacent again, like, okay, I'm doing enough. I posted my square. I said Black Lives Matters. But how far are people willing to go? And the corporations right now and our politicians learned that after MLK was assassinated, you don't want to kill a leader in a movement because that invigorates them and makes them go even harder than before. All they have to do to slow down a movement is retweet a leader and represent that
Mm.
same message and posture and make people content. Then the revolution dies down. It's that messaging and that co-opting that we need to worry about right now.
I saw the Wendy's Twitter page. Apparently, I mean, Wendy's has a lot of viral tweets because they, go around and roast people. They posted something about how this tweet or this account now will be dedicated to, like listening to black voices or elevating black voices. And what they meant
Yeah.
by that was they wouldn't be tweeting. So as opposed to, using their large platform to tweeting out, power ideas or suggestions or groups or something like that, they just said, well, we're not going to post, and hopefully that'll mean that more black voices get elevated. And look, I'm not like against that, right? Like that first tweet there where I almost called Wendy's a she, but where Wendy's is like, yeah, we're going to be elevating black voices there. Yeah, I mean, it got a lot of likes and retweets, so it's not like that's bad, but I do sometimes worry that there's this kind of trying to grift almost on the Black Lives Matter movement because it can get them wins, and that worries me. That worries me.
Yeah, and that's always going to happen with these movements. Not everyone's going to be like Ben and Jerry's and post defund the police. The
Right, right.
police, like not just the police unions and all the power the police have, the whole police state is so powerful
Yeah,
in our
absolutely.
country. The war on drugs built that up right after Jim Crow and everything ended with the civil rights movement. They had to find another way to subjugate and control. Um, but these corporations can either really help by saying defund the police and look at the systemic issues, or they can really hurt it by focusing on individuals and focusing on individual stories. Because if you focus on individual cops, individual people killed by cops, you're not looking at the broader picture of what's actually happening. And I think the left has a messaging issue as well. When I hear people saying all cops are bad, like in
Hmm.
reality, of course, all cops aren't bad people. What they're saying, and I understand them because I'm in this stuff, I'm involved. I know they're saying no matter what, you're in an evil system. So inherently, you are an evil actor because you're
Right.
bowing down to that system. I think that's a really bad messaging tactic right there because people hear that. They say, all cops are bad. Well, screw you. I know someone that's a cop and I never heard of him doing anything bad. So we have to make sure we say this. The issue is the system. The issue is saying, I'm going to follow the orders of this system. The issue isn't individual cops. No matter how many bad apples we get rid of, if we kept all the good cops, since the system is still evil, it needs to be abolished and brought up into something new and better and ran by our communities instead of big bureaucracies that are out of our control.
Yeah, I do sometimes wonder though, I've got to ask you, I do sometimes wonder though if the bad apples messaging in a sense can direct people to a more abstract, you might say, idea, like pointing out, particular videos, because it's a lot easier for someone to sit down, watch a 2-minute video of a cop abusing someone as opposed to having convincing them to read even maybe 3 paragraphs, densely explaining what defund the police means, or even worse, get someone to even more difficult, get someone to read a book about the systemic issues about around policing. So I do sometimes wonder if maybe there is an important role to be had for look at this bad cop, look at that bad cop, and then
Mm.
leave people to make up their own minds or be like, man, F the police, we got to do something, and then they might latch on to something. I don't know. I sometimes wonder
Yeah.
about that.
Well, that's up to us, and it's up to other people on the left and other humans in general that care about what's happening with this authoritarian system. It's up to us to educate people who do care because of those videos, and it does have a positive impact if they see the police doing that and they vote for somebody who is for defunding the police as a result. They don't need to see the systemic part of it, if they don't have to. If that compassion is there, if their compassion for change is truly there, it's not a big deal, but it's up to us educating and it's up to them seeing that and having that hopefully be a gateway. I mean, I know a lot of people are too far gone, but there are a lot of people who are willing to learn and are willing to grow. And if you're born into a poor white neighborhood and you work for 60 years and you don't own anything, and then this college student comes up to you and tells you that you have white privilege, it is a hard thing to really grasp right there because you're saying, what privilege? I worked my whole life. How do I have some advantage over a black man? And these people are normally not educated with a college degree. They never had a sociology class. They were never prompted to read a book or look at a documentary that explores systemic racism and our very dark past. So I think we need to be able to educate without offending first. And like you said, there is a positive role to be played. by these cop videos because it is opening the door at least.
It is opening the door at least. Well, thanks so much, Joey, for joining us. I really appreciate the conversation and definitely fruitful for all of us to take a listen to, take a learning from. Make sure to go check out his channel. You can see that little plaque sitting there behind him. It has his channel, Jolah. It's absolutely fantastic. All right, we'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.